Hello, welcome to another episode of the F1 Hour with my friend and yours, the goatiest of all F1 goats to have ever goated, the one that they call Mr. Peter D.
Mhm.
Windsor. How are you doing, good sir?
Yeah, I'm very well. Thanks, Cam. Very well. Lovely spring day here in Spain. Dexter's taken me for a nice long walk. So here we are, ready to go.
Ready to go as always. Mr. Windsor, as is compulsory, what do you make to be the biggest story to come out of this weekend's Chinese Grand Prix?
Well, from my personal perspective, it was that I managed to get some videos out, even though we had an incredible internet drama going on in this part of Spain for most of the weekend. So I was doing most of it hotspotting on a cell phone, and we got there in the end, kind of. But all those who thought, "What's going on here with Windsor's videos?" Apologies, and hopefully you understood or understand now the dramas. But no, from a broader perspective, 30,000 foot perspective, I would say it's time basically to say, right, the election's over. Netflix have won. The Netflix generation are now telling us what we're going to have in Formula One. So it's up to the rest of us who didn't necessarily vote for that to make the best of it and see what comes out of it that might be nice and interesting and good to watch. And there were a couple of good things for me. Actually, the best thing of the weekend was Lewis's turn in into turn 16, the last corner, the left-hander. That was a breath of fresh air for me. I haven't seen him drive like that. I said 2.5 years in the video, glibly thinking, well, it's probably a bit long, but it's probably 4 years, isn't it? He was just beautiful through there to watch, and I could have watched that all day. I didn't need any more overtaking, didn't need anything. I could have just watched Lewis going into turn 16, and that would have made me very happy if I'd bought a
Yeah.
ticket and flown all the way to China. So that was the first thing, and I think that paid off in the race. How good he was, and that set him up for the lap really, and the confidence he then had on the lap. And yeah, from a I don't know what 5,000 foot view now, I would say lots of overtaking, lots of this, lots of that, but be careful of how you judge that because I've had a few people say to me in emails and stuff this morning and what's, oh, what about Gasly and Max side by side through turn seven and Lewis and Charles turn seven side by side? Be careful because turn seven is basically a straight now. It's not a corner. That's why they can do that. It's not as if the guy on the outside is on the marbles, on the ragged edge with a bit of opposite lock, sort of Mark Webber like. No, it's just basically they're coming into seven and then the engine just go, ooh, and they're droning around seven. No wonder they can go around side by side. It's a bit like, the formation lap behind on a rolling start. So that's what we're seeing. But that, on television, if you hype up the commentary, you can really make a lot of that. Oh, look at that, side by side, turn seven, unbelievable. But to be honest with you, as James Hunt always used to talk about his grandmother, and I've often said, his grandmother was probably pretty quick, actually, by standards of most grannies. She was probably quite a quick driver, knowing James Hunt's granny. But he always used to say, oh, my granny could do that. And I'm pretty sure right now he'd be saying, well, my granny could do that because she could, side by side turn seven in 2026. It's not side by side turn seven 2025. Completely different animal. And it'll be the same at cops. You'll see some overtakes on the outside of cops probably, and people will go ballistic about it. But in reality, it'll be because they're in mega superclip mode or whatever they want to call it. And they're going through side by side, sort of 40 kilometers slower than the tires actually would be able to take it. So, yeah, that's my take on it. Yeah, lots of jumping up and down, screaming, overtakes, excitement, drama. You know me, I'd much rather watch the perfect lap being driven, whether it be pole or some lap in the race, regardless of what's going on around it, than all this hype. And that's me. That's just me. I like perfection and I like on the limit perfection of the type we see rarely from the great, great drivers of this era. Obviously, would be Max, would be Charles. Welcome back, Lewis, I think, and and a couple of others on the verge. But all the other stuff, be careful, because it isn't actually what it appears to be. But I'm not going to say we've got to change it because we ain't going to change it. It's there. The Netflix generation have given us this new Formula One. And what can we do but continue to compete and watch the races?
Go on then, Mr. Windsor. Let's double click on this very unique brand of Formula One because, again, it is split the community somewhat. Some say that this, per Fernando Alonso, that this is the World Championships or the Battery World Championships. Max Verstappen said that this is Mario Kart, that he's not enjoying it. And if you think that this is real racing, then you don't know anything about racing. In stark contrast, Lewis said, "I've never raced better F1 cars in my entire career. That his back and forth between the back and forth between him and Charles was super enjoyable." Um, did we see proper racing this weekend, Peter?
There's a common factor there, isn't it? All the guys who are not going very well don't like it. And Lewis is suddenly on the crest of a wave, thinks it's brilliant. Isn't that shocking? No, but I think to give Max his credit, that wasn't the only thing he said. He did then go on to say, even if I was in a great car, I'd still be saying the same thing. He did actually say that. And I think that's true. I think Max has always been driven by the feeling of perfection on a corner or a lap or a session or a race than he is just the thing of winning and being at the front and trophies and interviews and podium ceremonies. He's driven just as much by the feel of the surface of the road, and I genuinely believe that's correct. I think if Red Bull had come out with an absolute rocket ship and he was racing the Mercedes or even ahead of the Mercedes, I think he'd probably still be saying the same thing. And here's another point. I think that if Max was in a Mercedes now, I'm not answering your question, but I'm just going on from there. If Max was in a Mercedes now, and let's say it was Max versus George, or let me say Max versus Kimi. I mean, you might as well take your pick now. It doesn't really matter, does it? They're both very, very good. I don't think Max would be able to do a lot more than George can do against Kimi. And that's not to say that Max isn't a better driver than George. I think he is in a couple of dimensions, but not every aspect. But I think he does have the edge over George in a number of areas. And those that know my channel well would know what I'm talking about. It's the softness of touch, the suppleness, the ability to shorten the corner by lengthening the straight going into the corner and the exit as well, getting the car beautifully rotated at exactly the right moment, least possible downside, not worrying about a high minimum speed, all those great things that Max does and Charles. I don't think those things actually carry as much weight in this new era as they used to. And therefore, I think it would be more, even if he was in a Merc, I don't think Max would be just walking away from Kimi or from George. And maybe that's what, and I think that's the gist of what he's trying to say, to be honest. I think the heart and soul of what makes a Max and a Liam Lawson is kind of been neutralized. And that's how I see these regs. And I think Max is kind of saying that as well. Sorry, Cam, what was the question?
No, did we get to see any proper racing? Because I mean, even
Oh,
for
okay, yeah.
myself, Peter, I
Yeah.
didn't hate the sprints, but I was less enamored by the race proper. Like I didn't feel. But
Yeah.
again, Gazillion F1 fans are saying, "Oh, this is proper." I had 1,000 text
Yeah.
messages saying F1 is back. This is proper racing. I've never seen so many overtakes like injected
Yeah.
into my veins. Did we get to see any proper racing? Do you think?
Well, again, I'm probably not right person to answer because for me, proper racing doesn't necessarily mean a lot of overtakes. Proper racing could be one overtake with incredible defense throughout a Grand Prix. Alonso versus Michael at Imola, good example. And and so, yes, I mean, Formula One is back. And I don't think Formula One's ever been like this apart from Monza slipstreamers. And then it was kind of different because they're flat out on the throttle the whole way. I'm talking about Monza before they put chicanes in. Then we had lots of place changes. But as I keep saying, be careful of how excited you get about all these place changes because a lot of them are taking place when they're not on full power from the engine and they're actually going around corners 20, 30 kilometers an hour slower than they could go if they had a normal engine and they weren't limited in any way on what power they could use. And in other words, what the Pirelli tires would give them in terms of grip and indeed the downforce and everything else that a Formula One car has. So we're not seeing that very much. We're not seeing a lot of uh, on the limit driving. We're seeing a lot of close wheel to wheel. What's the right word? I don't know if it's racing or driving, just
Yo-yo
driving
racing.
alongside one another, round and round on the outside all the time because they're not on the limit. But you know, okay. Let me rephrase. And we kind of did this in the last chat, I think.
Mm.
Let me rephrase. Let me recast where we're at right now. And if in 2023 Cameron and P. Windsor had been involved in formulating the new regulations for 26, and we'd come up with normally aspirated engines, no limit on the power you can use throughout the lap, lots and lots of renewable fuel energy research and great fuels, less downforce, smaller contact patch on the tires, but full-on racing engines. And we'd just had five teams fighting for the lead, and Max and Charles Leclerc battling over the entire distance of the Chinese Grand Prix. Would people still be saying, well, Formula One's dead now, it's terrible because we don't have all these, we really wanted to have 50% electricity and we want the cars to go much slower in various parts of the lap so they can be running side by side everywhere. I mean, it's of course, whatever you have is what you have, to quote Michael Schumacher. And if they come up with a regulation which basically says at its most global, throughout the lap there will be points where you cannot use the engine at its maximum. If you come up with a rule that says that, inevitably you're going to have lots of cars bunching up around corners and going around side by side and lots of overtakes. It's an inevitable thing. But we've never done that before in the history of Formula One because we've always thought, nah, we want them flat out, don't we? We want them on the limit throughout the lap. If they'd done that in the turbo era, for example, in the great 80s, when everybody used to say that was the golden era, it was Senna, Piquet, Mansell, Prost, and the turbo, 1100 turbo horsepower Formula One cars. If we'd had a limit of, I don't know, throughout the lap, you can only use 1100 horsepower twice, and the rest of the time it has to be only 500 horsepower. And they'll be droning around 500 horsepower, looking at one another, going down the straight, waiting till they can get to the next power section. We would have had massive overtaking and lots around the outside. But we didn't do that because we thought, well, that's a bit juvenile. Why would we want to do that? We want proper race cars for proper racing drivers. And now, because Formula One is in a completely different era, and it is quite a juvenile era. I mean, it's probably the right word because the Netflix generation is, well, I don't know, what is it, Cam? What is the age group of the Netflix generation?
18 to 35.
Okay, well, it's probably younger than that, I would think. I would say probably 16 to 35. And if that is now the defining era age group of Formula One, then for sure they're not going to worry about whether or not the car is on the limit. Whether the car is doing. It's interesting, isn't it? How often do we see the G meter now coming up on the screen? Not much.
Yeah.
Whether the car's doing 1.8 G or 3.5 G around the left-hander doesn't seem to matter at all to the Netflix generation, so long as they're going around side by side. Or the next thing, three abreast into cops. Unbelievable racing, but they won't be on the limit. I can tell you that. So to answer your question, was there any racing? I'd like to say into the first corner for both races, there was some racing. There was, I think, from Charles and Lewis, from the Ferraris. That was a bit. But then again, it was against a grid which had no McLarens and a Max Verstappen going backwards, so which are a function of those three things, a function of the new regs. And then afterwards, it was all power surges. In my opinion, it was power surges. I didn't actually see anything that I would call a real overtake, other than I'm just trying to think.
Lewis and Charles, some of those.
Well, were they though? I mean, no, I don't think. If suddenly the rules had changed halfway through the race and they said you can use maximum power throughout the lap, do you think they would have been doing all those funny overtakes?
No.
No, of course they wouldn't. Lewis goes ahead for 4 laps. Charles cools his tires down and his radiators down a bit, and then he does power surge and he goes ahead. I thought it was quite funny once when Charles was behind Lewis and his engineer said, okay, press this, do that, on the straight. And Charles didn't do anything. And he said, Charles, did you press it? And Charles said, oh, no, sorry, I didn't hear. What was that? He was sort of half asleep of droning around behind Lewis. And, that's what it is. And of course, Lewis loves it because when was the last time he was in this situation?
Yeah, but Charles loved it too. Peter, Charles jumped out in the car. In fact,
Well, he did,
once he was in the car, he said that this was actually quite fun.
Yeah, I know. I'm still confused by that. I don't know why he would have said that. I mean, either that the Monaco Grand Prix is coming up and he wants everybody to feel it's wonderful and he's got some deal going on with the FIA or something. I don't know. But I can't imagine that was anything other than agony for Charles Leclerc, to be honest. And full marks to him if it was agony, and he said that after the race publicly, just to get everybody fired up. And Ferrari are making an effort now that they're going. There you go. It's because Ferrari are going well, isn't it? And the last thing Charles wants now is for any regulation change to take place or anything to interfere with the way that Ferrari are now gathering momentum. They're not that far away from Mercedes. Hopefully, they got over a jump over McLaren now that McLaren have had that issue. the last thing he wants are the regulations to change, or he wants everything just to stay calm and nice because he knows that over a season he's got a half reasonable chance now of winning some Grand Prix and maybe, maybe being in there for the championship. So that's probably why Charles said that. It's just as, oh yeah, great. Yeah. But when he got home, he probably threw his helmet on the ground. And what was that all about? Right? But politically, he did the right thing because you don't want to rock the boat at the moment. If you're anyone at Ferrari, you want to say, oh, yeah, congratulations to the FIA. This is just a brilliant thing. The fans love it. We love it. Everybody loves it. And of course, Lewis genuinely loves it because, as I say, not only is he quick, not only is he able to actually pass a Merc periodically and do what he did at the start, but he's also beating Charles Leclerc. And he's actually very near Charles. So there's so many good things about this for Lewis. I would say he's probably the happiest guy on the grid right now.
Yeah.
Was a bit worried about Kimi. No, Kimi's probably the happiest guy. Kimi and then Lewis, I'd say, yeah.
Do you not think that Charles and Lewis, to a probably a greater extent, that they're just ultimately racers? I know you always compare Lewis in 2026 to Lewis Ryehouse Lewis. Isn't that what we saw yesterday? That irrespective of the circumstance and how contrived the overtaking manoeuvres were, that ultimately the likes of Charles and Lewis just want a ding-dong battle between each other that lasts more than a couple of laps, and that's what we got yesterday, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I've never said Lewis wouldn't enjoy racing in a competitive car and has lost his feel for enjoyment. And I've never said that if he doesn't have a half reasonable car that's giving him a bit of confidence, that he's not going to be quick and do the job. All I've ever said is that even if that's the situation and they've got a great car over a championship, I think Charles will beat him. But obviously Lewis will win races, and I still stand by that. But yeah, I think for Lewis, because when I said cynically, obviously, for Lewis to beat Charles now, he needs to get rid of everything in his life, get in the flat in Modena, listen to the LP records that Phil Hill used to listen to, and become a Peter Collins, Mike Hawthorne clone, whatever. Obviously I was painting a rather cynical picture, but I was trying to make a point that he needs to strip off a massive number of layers in order to become a pure Lewis Hamilton again. And I still think that's the case, but he with these cars, as neutralizing as they are, regardless of whether at the front of the grid or the back, they're neutralizing. These cars give Lewis, and obviously in the case of Ferrari, it does have reasonable feel. He can play around with the back of the car and get it to do some things that he could never do with the Merc or even last year's Ferrari. With these cars, he can really do what he wants and get a result. And that's a great feeling for any racing driver. And it's a great feeling for Lewis Hamilton without in any way changing his life and not adopting the Peter Windsor, Modena bedsit scenario. He can still carry on being who he is and go out and enjoy being as competitive as he is and having fun. So that's where we're at. I mean, don't read too much into it. I still think that, well, you know what I think.
Yeah.
It's easy to go side by side if they're suddenly going down to effectively half power in the middle of a quick corner. Of course, you can go around side by side.
Yeah, it's a good shout. Go on then, Peter. Let me pick your brain on this Lewis Hamilton circumstance because, again, this is a subject that divides the community because Lewis Hamilton fans are saying, we are back. Bring on the eighth. Lewis Hamilton of Singapore 2018. I mean, the only reason why you couldn't see those sort of performances is because Mercedes didn't give him the car. Meanwhile, you have F1 aficionados saying, hang on a second, let's pump the brakes on the Lewis Hamilton eighth, because ultimately this is one of his favourite tracks, and even then he only just managed to beat Charles Leclerc. Let's have this conversation when we get to Monaco or Spa or Suzuka, when Charles Leclerc will once again be Charles Leclerc proper. What do you make of those, Peter? On what side of that fence do you sit?
Well, because I'm a bit confused myself as to how much the great corners have been neutralized and whether or not that will ebb back into a place of more absorbing interest as the season progresses. I just don't know. And I don't think anybody knows. But what I do know is that it'll be certainly worth watching what happens at Suzuka because that is a real circuit with some real corners. I mean, Shanghai, as I said in my previews, to my mind, there've only ever really been two interesting, significant corners in Shanghai. And one is turn 7 and the other is turn 16. And 16, to his credit, Lewis was brilliant there. And I thought Charles was pretty sloppy there, actually. I'm not quite sure why. He just didn't look very consistently good through there, not in the way Lewis did. In terms of just the way they used that curb on the right hand side, and how early Lewis was getting the front end of the car in there. Just beautiful to watch. Where Charles was making a little bit more of a corner of it, which is very unusual for him. But maybe that is why he always says Shanghai's not a great circuit for me. Maybe it's that last corner that's always psyched him out. I've often sort of extrapolated from there and said, I wonder whether it's got anything to do with it being a left-hander, because there aren't that many great left-handers in Formula One. 130R used to be, but it's not anymore. I'd be interested to see what it's like this year. But most of the great corners are right-handers that I can think of. Well, no, it's not true. Pouin, I suppose, is another one in that left-hander. But in general, Charles was not good through that. So if Charles was saying in his little post-race thing, I need to really work on Shanghai and come back next year stronger and faster. My suggestion is turn 16, Charles. That's all you need to work at. Everything else, you're pretty good. And what was the train of thought before? What were we going on about? Oh yeah, where are we going to see from Suzuka? But I think at Suzuka, I think turn 1A, 1B, which is what I call the first kink, and then breaking into the tighter part of one. I think I've got a nasty feeling that's not going to be a great bit of road anymore. I think they're going to be energy harvesting coming into one, and I don't think you're going to see the cars on the limit. I hope I'm wrong, but I got a feeling that whole section and approach to one will be damped down at Suzuka. The S's will still be discerning, particularly at the top of the hill, and how they've got the car positioned, and then going into Dunlop. That'll be good. I've got a nasty feeling as well that going into Degner, it's going to be a clipping thing, and we're going to lose all impact of the Degners. Two great corners, Degner 1, Degner 2. Yep, they'll go. I don't know about Spoon, the long left-hander. Probably they'll be clipping into that too, I guess. And then obviously 130R will be just, flat, because they'll be clipping there. So we've still got the S's basically, and that's what we've got at Suzuka. And on the S's, I think you'll still see a Charles doing some very nice stuff at the top of the hill. You'll see Lewis. We'll see Lewis alongside Charles. That'll be interesting to see. And then if there is a difference, we'll know, well, yeah, it's not all over yet. It'll be interesting to see what Max is doing there as well.
Do you think if we do get to those corners, Peter, if we get to the S's at Suzuka, or Albert Park, turn 9, turn 10, another good example, Copse Corner, do you think it's proof positive that the FIA and the FOM need to get together and change something, not next season, but potentially over the course of April, that they need to make F1 proper F1 again?
Well, personally, I would want them to. I would love them to, but I don't think they will, for the simple reason that what we're going to have into turn 1 and turn 1A and 1B at Suzuka is two cars abreast. And everyone's going to say, wow, we've never seen this before at Suzuka. Isn't this unbelievable? Have to go back to the days of Ross Cheever in Super Formula to see a guy passing anybody on the outside going into one, passing Michael Schumacher as he did. But now they're going to say, oh, look, there's Liam Lawson passing Pierre Gasly on the outside into 1A. Isn't that unbelievable? This is the great Formula One. Of course, they'll be going 30, 40 kilometers an hour slower than they should be going in order to do that. But again, I make my point. I don't think the Netflix generation, not to be too disrespectful to them, they don't care about that at all. All they want to see is two cars side by side, hopefully banging wheels, hopefully not ending up and crashing and burning, but hopefully banging wheels and going into 1B, smoke coming up from the back of the cars, and one car, one tire. Maybe you'll see them two abreast through the S's, Cameron. I mean, that will be nonsense if that happens. But no, I'm sure they will be two abreast into 1 and 1A, because they'll be so slow there, if they're clipping.
Insane.
We're so far away from the limit, let's put it that way. Slow is the wrong word, but from the potential limit of where they could be. That's what, and Degner too,
That's
poor
a problem.
Sebastian Vettel, I remember watching him on a Friday once in Suzuka, getting to grips with the Degners and how brilliant he was there. His car control and his reflexes. He kept going in a little bit too deep, and the understeer would come in and the flick oversteer. But he was incredible to watch. This is right at the beginning of his career. Of course, all that's over now. Yeah. I mean, Arvid Lindblad will be going in, well, let's fuss about the Degners. They're easy flat, no problem at all. Understeer? I'm a negative camber right-hander. Understeer? Nah, no understeer at all. Brilliant. Just turn in. Of course, he's going 30, 40 kilometers an hour slower than he should, but anyway.
Yeah, not good, Peter.
And I'm not saying that as a grizzly old man saying, oh, we got to go back to those days. I'm saying, actually, I kind of get it because Formula One has not done a very good job, actually, of showing the difference between a Max Verstappen into 1A and a Liam Lawson into 1A at Suzuka. When we did have the great race cars, and there was a significant difference, Formula One did a very poor job of actually showing what the difference was. And people like me, you, and others used to say, "Oh, look, the turn in of Max there, and look at the way he's got the car settled, and all four tires on the road. Look at Liam; he's turning in wider, he's loading up the rear more spiky inputs." But Formula One never focused on that. So the next generation are not aware of that difference at all. So they don't care. They don't care whether they don't care if they're going into 1A 40 kilometers an hour slower. If they're going in side by side or three abreast, that's much more important for the Netflix generation, for liberty, obviously. And so, so people like me then look at other parts of the lap where you can still actually see a driver doing something significant or nice or beautiful. And it was quite difficult in China. I was pleased that we had some decent camera shots of Lewis doing that because that to me made the whole weekend worthwhile, actually, just watching Lewis's turning into turn 16.
Let me ask you about Max, Peter, because Max post race said some things. I mean, he accused brand new F1 fans that if they like what they see, then they know nothing, that this is a bit of a joke, and that F1 fans,
new fans or all fans, I think.
Well, right. So Max is saying that if you like what you see, then you're.
And I heard that bit. I mean, I think, but you said it was only the new fans. But I mean, surely that
I'm
a lot of the old fans as well.
In brackets, yeah, there are some old fans that like it. But then he said that you know nothing about racing. To which many an F1 journalist said, "Hang on, Max, you can't gatekeep A, the sport, and B, the lens through which different people, across different age ranges and different lengths and tenures of experience, that you can't tell people what to like or that they know nothing about the sport, because beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right, Peter? Or no?
Well, yeah, but then you have to say, well, why did the person asking that question in the first place? If they don't want him to say what he thinks, which they obviously did, what do you think about these new cars, Max? And the answer is going to be from the community. Oh, hang on, Max, you're not allowed to say that. You can't tell people what to like and what not to like. Then why ask Max in the first place? It's a bit, what is the point? If he is a 4 times world champion and he does have an opinion and he is driving one of the current cars, albeit not a very good car, but let's put that to one side. If people want his opinion on what the cars are like and what the racing is like, and he expresses his opinion, surely everybody should say, wasn't refreshing that the guy is saying what he actually thinks rather than worrying about whether he's going to get fined by the FIA.
I think, Peter, if he'd said like Alonso that this is the Battery World Championships or that it's Mario Kart, I think like half the population, half the F1 fan base would have been like, go for it, Max. But because he said, if you think that this is real racing, then you know nothing about the sport. It's like, well...
But isn't that what Alonso said? Alonso said, this isn't real racing. It's just it's just gaming, which is not real racing, obviously.
Yeah, fair.
Exactly. They said exactly the same thing, didn't they? And except that Max said, obviously to try and explain what he was trying to say, if you do think that was racing, it's exactly what I said at the beginning of the show. It phrased differently, probably, but if you think side by side through turn 7 was racing, it wasn't. That was not racing. That was 2 cars going around side by side with nothing like the pace they should be going, and with no power and very little power coming through the engine, through the back wheels. That's basically what Max is saying, isn't it? I don't see what the fuss is about. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. It wasn't racing.
I think Max is spot on. I just wish, I don't know, as a Max Verstappen stan, I just wish that he'd stop short of saying, you know what I mean, proselytizing DTS fans and saying, well, if you think this is real racing, then you know nothing about the sport. It's like, it's kind of in line with a lot of what F1 have been doing, saying on the reverse side of things, saying that, 140 overtakes, this is the best thing in the world that we've ever seen. It's almost like, I don't know, Peter.
Yeah, you and I can have a 20-minute discussion about all the good things that the Netflix generation and Liberty have brought into Formula One, and how it's better in this area or that area and whatever it is, Drive to Survive, whatever you want to talk about. If you ask Max Verstappen, who's a racing driver and a pretty hard-nosed racing driver at that, what he thinks of the cars, he's not going to start saying, well, Liberty did a very good job, and I understand everybody has their own opinion and where you're coming from, what age group you are, and what you grew up with, whether you're a Senna fan, whether you're a Michael fan, whether you're a Lewis fan. In my opinion, blah, blah, blah. He could do all that stuff, but you ask a blunt Dutch racing driver who's won 4 world championships what he thinks of this racing that quite obviously everybody knows he doesn't like anyway. Why would he? What do you expect? I mean, he's not a diplomat. He's just a normal guy. He's going to express an opinion. And if he said, you know, if you think that's racing, you don't know what you're looking at. You know what he's trying to say. You know exactly what he's trying to say. Equally, if you think it's Formula One, that there's 100,000 fans out there all wanting your autograph, Max would sort of say, yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? Liberty have done a great job. But if you know in your heart that was not racing, what are you going to say? He's going to say, you think that was racing? That's what I would say. Of course you would. The point is, Liberty, as I keep saying, I don't think the Netflix generation care whether or not the cars are on the limit going around the corner. So long as they're going around side by side, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
So they might as well make all the races super slow. Slow everything down by another 100 kilometers an hour.
Oh, Peter,
just cruise around 3 abreast into every corner.
A bit problematic, eh? It is a bit
problematic. Where do you draw the line on it? As I keep saying, ultimately what has happened is that you've taken Ayrton Senna, Michael Schumacher, Sterling Moss, Jim Clark, Juan Manuel Fangio, Jackie Stewart, Mario Andretti, all the great drivers you can remember. You put them all in the same race car. You've put them on a lap of Spa, and you've said, right, you guys are all going to race to see who's the best driver in the history of the sport. Oh, and by the way, at 5 times of the lap, we're going to take 50% of the power out of the engine. Well, what would they all say?
No.
They'd say, well, that's not racing, isn't it? They'd say exactly what Max has just said.
Yeah.
So that is it. If you want it pure and simple, that is what the new regulation is. Now, I'm saying, okay, fine. We've still got Formula One. We've still got a championship. We've got Kimi versus George. We've got Charles versus Lewis. We've got Ferrari taking it to Mercedes, maybe. We've got McLaren maybe in trouble now on the decline. We've got possibly Max really, getting upset with things, but Red Bull presumably will come back at some point, and Aston Martin presumably will get better at some point. Got all these storylines, and let's accept it and get on with it with those storylines if that's what we got to do. And in the meantime, I'm going to try and find little areas where we can see a Max still doing what we know he can do, or and watch a Lewis get better, and watch a Charles where he can do what he can do, and carry on. And stop asking people. I'm talking to you now, but if the journalists want to have a happy ride with it all, stop asking the drivers like Max what they think of it.
Yeah, it's true. It's a good shout.
And express your own opinion rather than getting somebody like Max to do it for you.
Wow.
Dirty work for you. Isn't that more to the point? Isn't that what most of the journalists are doing?
Very well said.
They either not brave enough or they don't know, and so they want a Max to say it for them. And when Max calls a spade, half the world give him a hard time.
Yeah, everybody loses their mind. Let me ask you very quickly about Kimi Antonelli, because I, for one, didn't think that Kimi had it in him to keep a fire-breathing dragon in George Russell behind him to the tune of 7 seconds. I expected George to at the very least put Antonelli under some pressure towards the end of that race. Do you think, therefore, Peter, that this means that Kimi Antonelli has the minerals, that he's capable of challenging George for a championship this year?
In this regulation, yes.
Oh.
I don't think it would have been quite as straightforward if we were in last year's cars. As I say, I think these cars have diluted quite a lot of the demanding corners. Turn 7 is where George probably would have had an advantage over Kimi, which he was unable to show yesterday. Where else? Nowhere else really. It's just that because the cars are so limited on speed on so many places, it's the whole business of being resilient under pressure is less now. The whole business of trying to attack somebody in the same car is more difficult now, because a lot of areas of performance have been neutralized for the drivers. And that's why we're seeing that. I mean, if it was last year's car and it was the Belgian Grand Prix and there were 8 laps to go and George was 8 seconds behind, I would have put my money on George. But if it's this year's cars and it's the Belgian Grand Prix, exactly the same situation, I'd say, nah, Kimi will cruise it easy. And that's the difference. It's made it a little bit easier for everybody, I think. And that's why guys like Max are upset about it because, you know, there's less opportunity for them to be Max Verstappen.
Yeah. Taken away some of their tools. What do you make of
Yeah,
George,
so it's
though?
actually helped. It's helped the lesser drivers as well.
Wow. Fair. So no knock on George then for what happened yesterday. Of course, he had the
Well, yeah, I
misfortune.
mean, George finished second because of the drama he had in Q3.
Fair.
That's why he finished second. And you know, he wasn't on the pole and he didn't win the start. And he got the obviously got the drama of the stacked pit stop, and then he got traffic. And by the time all that was clear, it was no way. There's no way you can take 8 seconds out of a
No.
guy who's very good, very quick in the same car. No way, no chance.
But I mean, he'd been point 0.3, point 0.4 on him, or erstwhile, all that weekend, right, Pete? I don't know. I just expected. I feel like I need to
He would have taken
recalibrate.
more out of the tires getting past all those cars.
Fair, but I
All
mean,
of
since it's
that.
the battery championship, I'd expected him to just scythe through Scuderia Ferrari in the hands of Lewis and Charles. But again, maybe that's
On the
me.
contrary, because it is the battery
Yeah,
championship, it took so long to do it
yeah.
because it's all about all these ridiculous places on the lap where you can't be super quick.
Yeah, he said of much that they're quick in all the wrong
Quick in all the
places.
right places, yeah, and that's right. Well, everybody is, you know,
Yeah,
everybody's trying to harvest the energy in the most efficient way possible around the lap. But some people obviously have more grip, more downforce, and do a better job harvesting the energy and have more energy to harvest in the first place. So that's the difference. But we still have all these sort of black spots all around the lap where they're just, you know, they've got the foot flat on the throttle and yet the engine's losing power and revs,
yeah.
speed.
But
And that's not, and there's nothing you can do about that, particularly if your tires are not in quite as good a shape as the guy you're trying to catch in the same car.
yeah. There's a lot of chatter as well, Peter, about Mercedes' dominance and this additional developmental and upgrade opportunities that kicks in as of race 6 this year. Are you averse to seeing a levelling of the competitive landscape, as is one of the strategic objectives of the FIA as of race 6? Or do you think that Mercedes, given the brilliant package that they've built, that they've leveraged for some very tricky compression ratios, do you think they should be allowed to keep this advantage for the season entire?
But they are changing the compression ratio rule, so that's enough. They won't do any more, and they don't know what effect that will have on all the Merc runners. So we'll have to wait and see. And that's, I mean, the problem with anybody wanting to have things changed is that Alpine are now going well. So you'd always say, well, do you really want to hurt a team like Alpine that's been fighting for so long to get up into the top six, and now they're finally there with Mercedes power? We've got a great new team coming into the frame, and now you want to change it all just because Mercedes are doing well? That's the argument that Mercedes will probably use, actually. We don't want to hurt all our customers. It's not just us. And so I don't think it will change at all, apart from the regulation they've already announced, you know, the
Mm,
compression ratio thing. I don't think that'll have any effect either,
no.
only because nobody else is near enough to them really to take advantage of that. Even if Mercedes lose, I don't know, a couple of percent of power, it's not going to be enough for Ferrari suddenly to become the dominant team for the rest of the year. They might win some races, but they won't become the dominant team in the way Mercedes are now. And Mercedes just continue to get better. The big question is all these electrical
Close.
dramas. And again, you know, it's very annoying that Formula One doesn't become more explicit and graphic and romantic about what these issues are. And McLaren did a good job of telling us that there were different issues on the two cars in China between Lando and Oscar. But was one of them the same as the issue that George had? That would have been an interesting bit of information, but we don't know that. They'll never tell us, I suppose. And so we'll go on with this sort of glib thing, electrical problem. What does that mean? Does it mean battery? Does it mean some sort of connection? Does it mean the loom? What does it mean? You know, it's wrong. You know, Formula One wants to be this technical and come up with a set of rules that are incomprehensible to the drivers, let alone the fans. They should do a better job of explaining it and forcing the teams to explain what's going on.
Absolutely, Peter. But is it wrong at the altar of F1 and their lack of explanation and translation, or is that situation wrong at the altar of Mercedes not fulfilling their strategic partnerships and giving McLaren the PU in a timely fashion and the software using which they can detect, and solve for some of those issues?
Well, I don't think you can ever blame Mercedes for any issues with the customer teams because ultimately they're lucky to be customer teams and to have Mercedes power. So they've got nothing to complain about. The only thing is whether the Concord Agreement should have been drawn up a lot more efficiently, and it should have been one of the clauses in there should have been that the teams have to give out a lot more information about the technical issues because we want to sell this as part of the sport, and we want to put these technical issues out there as content that the public can know and love, and they must do that. It's not good enough just to leave it to the teams to decide what they want to put out. That clause was presumably not put into the Concord Agreement, and I'd like to know why.
Oof, oof. Maybe because F1 likes the gatekeep, and that's why they didn't have an open test the first time round. That they were quite concerned about this very ambitious rule and reg set that it's 50% electric and 50% ice when it should probably be 60-40 or 70-30 maybe. I speculate, Peter.
But if they were concerned, why is it that nobody then spoke up and said, "Don't be concerned. This is brilliant stuff. The fans will love it. Whether it's difficult problems they're solving, whether it's amazing solutions that they've achieved, this is all great stuff. Let's get it out there." Why wasn't there somebody saying that in these meetings?
They're gatekeepers inherently, Peter, and always have been. Some
Mhm.
might say,
I
but there
think
is a
that aren't we told they're also, show entrepreneurs and they love the show and they love and that it is entertainment. Isn't that what we're told about it? And part of the entertainment should be the technical problems that are being solved and the all-nighters and the head scratching and the going grey overnight and the champagne corks popping when they find a tenth of a millisecond in downforce in the wind tunnel and all that stuff that's not being put out there, and all these dramas with the electrics of the two cars. When was the last time a team like McLaren didn't even make the grid?
yeah, no, it's
Running team, and that's great stuff to understand, not in a critical way, but to understand the human work and endeavor that goes into trying to solve those problems and what it was like in the McLaren garage at that point and the discussions that took place. Brilliant television. Who's covering that? Where's that going to be shown? Nobody. It's all lost.
I think we're being a tad optimistic, Peter, who've passed this
Of course, we're being
prologue.
optimistic.
Uh,
I'm just saying, of course, we're being optimistic, but I'm just saying that is the counterpoint to saying, oh, well, they didn't want to do anything in case it didn't work, and maybe there were lots of issues. The point is, it doesn't matter. This is great technology. And Formula One, if it doesn't want to have all this great technology, should just go the way of being a glorified Formula Two and just have everybody in Delaris if they don't want it. Go ahead and just have normal racing again. If they want all this stuff and they want all the fans to love it all, get the technology out there in a way that's comprehensible and digestible.
there isn't an easy friction, Peter, between the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and F1 looking like it's the bastion and the peak of automotive innovation. Right? There's almost like inherent in the latter comes this sort of a 1984. They can't show us everything. They can't show us the problems, and we couldn't afford to see 20 cars parked up on track because of reliability issues at the first test. Because then all of a sudden, well, F1 can't be as innovative and as forward thinking as they try and put forth. Right? They're spinning for
Well,
very many
it's
different
time to
places.
change. It's time to change. And there should be a proper technical explanation as to why the MGUH was dropped, just as a starter, so that everybody understands that although Formula One put a massive amount of energy and brilliant brain power and innovation and creativity and money into the development of the MGUH, ultimately it's not in Formula One anymore. Why? Isn't that a good starting point? That's not going to hurt anybody. Let's just start with that. And then let's start with the electrics, so-called electrics that are causing all these problems. And then the batteries, which are obviously causing a problem at Aston Martin still, and presumably some other teams, maybe Audi, I don't know. And go from there. It's, one step at a time, but it's not difficult. Let's make the technology part of the show and stop being scared of it. Even your two Wall Streeters eating their bagels with the cream cheese would get it then. Oh yeah, I get that, man. Yeah, okay, that's cool.
Our private equity mates. Oh,
Yeah,
dear.
exactly.
As you round third, Mr. Windsor, super generous with your time as
Mm,
per usual. I wanted to ask you about Lawrence Stroll. We've talked a lot about Adrian Newey and the decision to appoint him as team principal, even in
mm,
just a nominal capacity. But the
mm.
rumour is in the F1 paddock that Lawrence Stroll, as of this race weekend, is now questioning whether that was the right decision. Adrian said last year that he was going to turn up for the first 6 races of the year, so it was almost a convenient symbiosis that he was going to be a team principal. I note that he wasn't there in China, and again you hear these rumours that Stroll potentially wishes that he'd sided with Andy Cowell instead of Adrian Newey when they had their spat last year. What do you make of this Lawrence Stroll, Adrian Newey, Andy Cowell love triangle? Do you think potentially Lawrence Stroll did make a mistake now, given the Honda PU and its multitudinous foibles?
Well, I think Lawrence Stroll runs the team. So that's why I say this whole team principal thing is just a name. And ultimately, nothing will happen without Lawrence's consent. So that's the first thing. It's not like a normal team where Christian Horner could have made a lot of decisions without having to consult Dietrich Mateschitz. But I don't believe very much would happen at Red Bull without Lawrence Stroll knowing about it. So ultimately, that's why Adrian's probably quite happy to be team principal, because it doesn't really, it's not the same team principal that Frank Williams was or Ron Dennis was. It's a sort of team principal, but yeah, Lawrence is the man. So he's in charge of the team ultimately. I would say, forget about all the semantics. The reality of Adrian appearing at Monaco last year in an Aston Martin cap, but not going to Japan until November is so absurd and so ridiculous and so incomprehensible that if I was Lawrence, I would be thinking, yeah, maybe I get rid of both these guys. And this is just
Oof.
insane. Why weren't they there? But having said that, I've just said he's running team. Why wasn't he in Japan? Why wasn't he out there doing all that stuff, making sure Honda were on the pace? Adrian, anything I can do to help? What do you want to do with the engine? What configuration are we going with the battery layout? What's the architecture of the exhaust? Blah, blah, blah. Let me go out to Japan now because I might be able to, move some muscle out there and get some stuff done. I'll take a few of my mates out there as well from Aston. They might be able to help as well. Anything else we can do to help? Wouldn't it be that if you were running a proper Formula One team? You'd be thinking about Adrian's weak areas. And maybe one of them is taking Honda for granted because they've been so good over the last 4 or 5 years. In his experience with him, another might be he's not very good with people, doesn't really want to spend a lot of time on man management, not that into paperwork with the FIA and all that speech making stuff. So we'll get somebody in to do all that. Isn't if you're Lawrence Stroll and it's your team, wouldn't you be thinking of all the areas where you would want to support Adrian before Adrian's even known that he needs support there? And you'd be in Japan. You're probably buying a house next to the Honda factory in Japan, making sure you've got your guys there 24/7, knowing that McLaren made a massive mistake when they went back to Honda and just assumed that Honda in Japan would get on and build a brilliant engine and took their eye off the ball, thinking that it would arrive and put them on the front row of the grid, and the engine was a joke. Wouldn't you have learnt from that and made sure that you've got your people in Japan the minute you've done your deal with Honda? Isn't that what you do? And equally, from Adrian's point of view, wouldn't you be saying that whole McLaren thing? They have been out a little bit. They decided to pull out. Now they're back in. I better just cover all bases with Honda and make sure that they're on the right path here. I'll go. I'm on the next flight out there. Lawrence, can I borrow your plane, please? Whatever. I hate flying hate long haul. Give me your whatever, your Global Express, and I want to fly straight to Japan. I want to set up actually an apartment there, and I want a translator, and I want this, and I want that, and I'm going to make sure we've got a second base there because I want Honda to feel that we're right on their doorstep. And any issue they have, I want to know about it the minute it happens. Isn't that what you'd be saying instead of us observers sitting around saying now, oh, maybe Adrian can't do it as team principal, and did Lawrence make a mistake with the whole Andy Cowell thing? I mean, why wouldn't Adrian have delegated Andy Cowell to go to Japan for 6 months and just make sure that they were on track? Or Lawrence delegate Andy Cowell to do that if Adrian's too focused on his, rear diffuser. Why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah.
I mean, in my experience as a team manager, all you do is think about what could go wrong tomorrow or this afternoon or next week. All the things that potentially could go wrong with the FIA, with the car. And in my case, I was always thinking about Patrick because Patrick Head was not the easiest man in the world with whom to work. Us, Heinz Harald Frentzen, quite a lot of guys were actually quite scared of Patrick, and he was quite a formidable person. And so to get the best from Patrick, Frank was always thinking of areas, Frank Williams that is, of areas where Patrick might need a bit of support and a bit of, reinforcement. And so when that event happened, Patrick didn't even know, oh well, that's not an issue. We got who have we got there? Got him there. And that's what you do. You build up all these resilient areas and make sure that the man you want to focus on the car and the engine is 100% focused on that job. And you patch up everything else to make sure that happens. So ultimately, I would say if Aston Martin Honda are in trouble now because they didn't spend enough time on the Honda program between Monaco and December, then the responsibility and the fault lies with Lawrence Stroll because he should have seen that Adrian is Adrian Newey. And we all know what Adrian's like. He's not like Patrick Head. He's a different sort of guy. But nonetheless, he's got his weak points, that's for sure. And I have a million weak points. But it's not difficult to read guys like Adrian and Patrick. Not difficult at all. When you've got people who are geniuses, it's very easy to see the areas where they're not so clever. It's usually the very mundane things. And it's not difficult to get those areas properly supported. And I think one of the problems is these teams are so big and there's so much money and they're so focused on sponsorship and our new partner this and that and that they tend to forget and not look at the very simple, obvious human areas of a race team, which I've just described. It's just making sure that Aston Martin has a proper foothold in Japan, which is Adrian Newey endorsed in terms of thinking and ethos and where they want to go throughout the summer, throughout the European summer and autumn.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen.
Wow.
Clearly.
Gary Anderson, Peter, wrote an
Yeah.
article where he said Honda historically have been quite nimble as far as their organisational capacity. That if they have issues, that they can turn them around very quickly. But the one thing that they don't like, that they won't tolerate, that won't make them faster and more efficient as an organisation, is disrespect in public. And last race weekend, what was the thing that Adrian Newey did? He blamed almost all of the foibles of Aston Martin on Honda. He spoke about them operationally, that he was surprised to find out that all of the people who were working there during the Red Bull days were no longer there and that they couldn't rehire them because of the cost cap. It is the Adrian Newey press conference last weekend proof positive of what you just speak, that Adrian Newey does have blind spots as far as his ability to manage the stakeholders, the key ones being Honda, HRC.
Yeah, I mean, that's a classic example of what I was just talking about. Lawrence Stroll should have realized that in this situation, this is one press conference that Adrian Newey feels he does have to do because he is the team principal and he does feel bad that the car is as slow as it is. So he's going to want to do this press conference. And it's your job as the owner of the team to say to Adrian, nah, you're not the right guy to do this, Adrian. Don't worry about it. Go to Japan, go this. We need to focus on the car. I will do the press conference myself, or I'll get somebody else to do it on my behalf. And the last person you would want in that situation is Adrian Newey, for exactly the reason you've said. You do not want to disrespect, or Gary Anderson has correctly said, do not want to disrespect Honda. And particularly with the whole Fernando Alonso thing in the background and what they've gone through there anyway. So you'd be absolutely laser focused on making sure in this difficult time that Honda do not in any way feel disrespected. And yet they seem to just let Adrian go on and do what he did, which, in that situation, I can't imagine Frank. I just can't imagine. I mean, say the Williams BMW era, when there were moments when Patrick was not happy with the BMW relationship. But Frank, in a million years, would never have said, oh, Patrick, will you do the next press conference, please, and tell everybody what you think about BMW? I mean, give me a break. Where is the logic in Aston Martin? I don't get it. Why isn't Lawrence Stroll doing that, just making sure that everybody does what they do well and don't ruffle feathers at this point. Just keep everything calm and smooth and get the best from Adrian Newey, this amazing engineer. He's obviously made a massive mistake, or you, as the owner of the team, have made a massive mistake in not allowing, in taking your eye off the ball of Honda once you've done your deal. But at least now that you've made that mistake, don't make it worse. Do not make it worse, as Gary Anderson very correctly says.
What a chaos that
I don't
Aston
blame
Martin.
Adrian for doing it because it's a human instinct. I'm team principal. I better do this press conference and bite the bullet. And he just said what in his mind was the truth. He doesn't think in terms of diplomacy.
Yeah.
Since when has Adrian Newey had majored in diplomacy?
He's not. That's not his strength. Peter, finally, let me ask you this question, because there has been a lot of rumour and speculation about Toto and Mercedes coming in to purchase the 24% worth of stake, as far as Alpine are concerned, the Otro Capital currently have, therefore gazumping Christian Horner's potential route back into the paddock. This gives rise to another mode of discourse, that if there is a chap who could solve for the issues at Aston Martin that needs to put people in the right places, then potentially you could do worse than appointing Christian Horner as a team principal, if indeed you're prepared to give him let's say 5 or 10% worth of stake. Do you think Christian Horner could be the guy to come in and solve for some of these Lawrence Stroll leadership ills, or putting the people in the right place, given his career of getting championships over the line?
You mean Christian going to Aston Martin?
Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming there's bad blood between Adrian and Christian, isn't there? Isn't that why Adrian?
Apparently not anymore. They were spotted at an Oasis concert. So apparently that was Christian extending an olive branch to Adrian, and that's no longer the case. Apparently, Adrian had a stipulation in his contract originally saying that Christian could never join Aston Martin, but since they've mended all bridges, that's no longer the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad in a way that Lawrence Stroll can't do that himself. I mean, it's not a very difficult job to go in there and say, well, Adrian, you focus on that. Don't worry about this. I'll look after Honda. Make sure that Andy Carl's happy here. The mechanic's happy. But it's quite easy to do that. You just got to have a little bit of a feel for racing and people. I suppose it's why Lawrence Stroll doesn't do that. But yeah, I mean, Christian would do a very good job there, but so would 300 other people. It's not a very difficult job. It's just a sort of, being Mr. Nice Guy type job. And if Adrian trusts Christian, then that's fine. Yeah, big deal,
Yeah. There was a lot of chatter as well that Lawrence Stroll quite fancied himself Jonathan Wheatley to be team principal. And again, that's probably not going to happen given that Jonathan is so early on in his tenure over there at Audi. But in a hypothetical world, Peter, I want to ask you this question.
Can I just answer that, though? I think Jonathan Wheatley would be the wrong guy because I don't see him politically adept. Well, that's the wrong word. I don't see him as being a sort of softly Christian Horner, glad, happy, isn't everybody wonderful type person. He's a hard racer that gets on with it. And probably they've got that person anyway, I would think, in that team, haven't they? I don't know if is Andy Stevenson still there? I don't know. I think if he is, he's very good. And they've got, well, I don't think that's the problem, is it? The problem is that they don't need a team principal. They've got people who can think on the ground. They've got racers. They've got Tom McCullough there, for Pete's sake, even though they're not using it at the moment. No, they just need, they did need somebody to have gone in and do exactly what I said. Get out to Japan now, Adrian, and just make sure that Honda know what they're doing. That gate is now closed. The horse is gone. So now it's just a question of damage limitation. And as I say, that's why 1 million people can do that job, really. Just employ a PR company if you want. It's not a big deal. But I wouldn't have thought they don't need a Jonathan Wheatley now. Audi was perfect for Jonathan Wheatley because they were all sort of wishy-washy, didn't know where they were going. And he was able to go in and crack the whip and make it a proper race team, which he's done. But Aston Martin don't need to crack the whip. They need to be the opposite. They need somebody who can get the best from Adrian without in any way putting him in an area where he's uncomfortable, like, international diplomacy.
And do you think that's Christian Horner more than it would be Jonathan
I
Wheatley?
think it's Christian Horner, definitely. He's that sort of person. But as I say, it's not the only person out there that could do that. As I say, it's not a particularly difficult job. You just got to, I suppose, yeah, he would do a good job there for sure. It's too late though. I mean, the job that needs to be done hasn't been done. So, as I say, now it's not, that's why I keep saying it's not a difficult job. You just got to go and massage things and make sure they don't get any worse. But the damage is done.
Uh,
And Christian Horner probably would have been a much more logical choice 12 months ago. But then Adrian probably wouldn't have accepted him anyway.
yeah. Yeah,
And haven't they got another bloke there, Mike Crack or something? What does he do?
not long dismissed,
Oh,
Peter,
really?
or at least redeployed. He's still
Oh,
over
okay.
there at Aston
Well,
Martin.
why wasn't he out there getting Adrian in Japan and making sure that they're on top of the Honda thing? Wasn't he team principal or something?
Yeah, he was team principal. I
You'd have been
don't
doing
know.
it. It's all damage limitation. A good team principal, like a good team manager, is damage limitation. That's all it is. Making sure things don't go wrong if you can help it.
But common sense, some say, Peter, in F1 is not too common these days.
Well, that's another matter. Yeah.
Do you think some of these issues come from are born out of even Adrian being? There's a lot of chatter that Honda were barking up one design philosophy tree as far as their battery, and then Adrian starts his first day in March of last year and says, "Rug pull, we're not going that direction. That direction is not fast. I want you to do X, Y, and Z. I want you to confine the battery in these dimensions, and I want you to put it here, right next to the engine, even though that for cooling, that's not." Do you know what I mean? Does Adrian?
Yeah, I'm sure that's what happened. I don't know whether that's specifically what happened, but for sure, Adrian went in and changed the architecture, I would imagine, knowing Adrian, around precisely what he wanted with the overall car that he was designing and building. That's why I keep saying the minute you start to do that with Honda, okay, fine, difficult, not a lot of time, but don't worry. Andy Cowell will be there 24/7. I'll be there twice a month, and we are going to send 25 guys over just to make sure they understand what's going on as well, who can relate directly with me. And you set up a little infrastructure in Japan straight away because you've got to avoid the problems that McLaren had with Honda. It's the first thing you do. Not difficult to think about that. Not difficult to imagine all the things that could go wrong if you don't do that and just leave them to their own devices. And that's exactly, they didn't do any of that. I assume, maybe I'm wrong, maybe they did. I don't know, but it looks like they didn't, and they just left Honda to it and got a big shock in November when things weren't going as they should.
Incredible, Peter. Do you think they can
Oh,
turn it
no, it's
around?
incredible, really, because it's very simple.
Yeah, no, true.
And people in Formula One don't like simple things because they like to make things as complicated as possible because that sounds good in Formula One speak, doesn't it?
Always. Do you think they can turn it around, Peter? And if so, how long do you think it will take them?
Of course, they can turn it around, and the cancellation or the postponement of these two Grand Prix will not hurt them at all. Any more than it'll hurt McLaren either. It's good for both of those teams. But whether it's enough for Fernando Alonso to get any joy out of his, finally having an Adrian Newey car to race, I don't know. I hope that he's competitive second half of the year for his sake, and that Formula One can benefit from seeing that, seeing an Aston Martin Honda designed by Adrian Newey, driven by Fernando Alonso, right up there. It'd be a great thing, wouldn't it? But I don't know. I mean, you got to say, apart from the complication of the technology, and obviously it's a big problem for them at the moment with the battery vibration and all the rest of it. Once they do get the thing to be pretty competitive, actually, it's not, from what we've seen now, it should be a doddle for Adrian then to produce a car that's actually right up there because, they don't have to have too much power throughout the lap anyway. And all Adrian needs is a car with good downforce and good grip and good tire management. And he's pretty capable of designing that. So they should be pretty quick, quite soon, I would have thought. It depends how long it takes to solve the battery issue. Could take 6 months, I suppose. Could take 6 weeks. Who knows? I have no idea. Need to talk to Gavin White on that, really.
Yeah. And with Adrian cheesing
I will
Honda
on an
off.
upcoming live stream. We'll get Gavin back on one of my
Not
shows.
a bad guy, Gavin. He knows a little bit
I'm
about it.
going to ask him if you got to design an F1 battery from scratch, how long would it take? It'd be an interesting question.
Yeah.
to
I
ask
think
him.
it'd be overnight.
Mm.
Lastly, Peter,
Mm.
a lot of chatter about Fernando Alonso potentially not making it through 2026. that he's got a little one on the way, and why would he want to go through the traumatic ordeal of revisiting what he had in 2017 with McLaren and GP dual engine rather infamously? Do you think Alonso makes it through 2026, and would you blame him for mid-season hanging up his Nomex?
Well, if Adrian at the British Grand Prix says to Fernando, look, Fernando, I've got to be honest with you, by Abu Dhabi, we'll be struggling to qualify higher than 18th. And that's a promise from me. The car is going to be absolutely nowhere all year. 27 will be quick, I'm pretty sure, but this year, forget it. I think Fernando probably will retire. Yeah, he'll probably think, well, stop this. But I don't think Adrian is going to say that. And there'll always be the next race and the next opportunity, and it could be wet, and Fernando could, suddenly do a Winkelhock and lead the Grand Prix, and all things can happen. So knowing the racer that he is and how long he's waited to be in an Adrian Newey car, I suspect Fernando will carry on as normal, won't he?
Yeah, probably. He'll muscle through. He's not got an ounce of quit in him. But again, I couldn't blame him.
Well, I mean, he's blowing away even with these funny cars. He's still blowing away Stroll by sort of half a second a lap, isn't he? Which is unbelievable, really, in that thing. Yeah. And Vettel was not in anything like that superior to Stroll, was he?
No, it's true. No, there's still life in Fernando Alonso.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Definitely. Interesting times. Mr. Windsor, as always, you've been an absolute legend. Those guys and girls out there watching, if you are not subscribed to the Peter D. Windsor YouTube channel already, then what are you doing with your life? Shortly thereafterwards, get over to the Short Corners podcast. Not bad, that, Peter D. Windsor. Sometimes, at some point in the not too distant future, hopefully I'll get in your dirty hair, mate, if dirty hair is such a thing anymore. You've been a legend, Peter. The guy on the right hand side of your screen has been Peter D. Windsor. I've been Cameron CC, as per usual. Between now and next time, may all your sectors be purple.